And now a special Diplomat Ireland interview with His Excellency Pierre-Emmanuel DeBauw, the Kingdom of Belgium Ambassador to Ireland. Your Excellency, welcome this morning.
Good morning, Micheal, and thank you very much for hosting me today.
Mr. Ambassador, I doubt that you would remember, but we met back in 1995 when you were a press officer in Washington, D.C., and I was working in the United States Congress. I see we're both a little older, hopefully a little wiser today, but it's good to catch up with you again.
Well, that's right. I'm delighted to catch up again. The name sounded familiar, now the face as well. It's good to see you again.
Well, it's good to see you, Mr. Ambassador. Listen, this is the third anniversary of your being greeted by President Higgins at the 15Oct20, where you were received as the ambassador in October of 2017. What has your experience been like in Ireland over the last 3 years?
Well, it's been a fantastic experience, Micheal. My wife and I, when we first arrived here 3 years ago, we felt immediately welcome by the Irish people. There's a sense of openness and generosity in this country that's very, very particular, and that we kind of love really very much. The experience has been that, well, this was of course before COVID times, but we could travel all over the country, and everywhere the same beauty. First of all, it's a magnificent country, and then the same charming people. Now, part of my experience is that Belgium and Ireland are actually so close that we often do not realize it.
So what do you find in particular that you appreciate most about the Irish people, and what do you find in common, those similarities you talked about?
Right. Well, what's obvious to me is that people in this country have a capacity to really marvel at things, to recognize the beauty where it is. I mean, it's not rare that when I run on the beach or when I hike in the mountains, the person I meet tells me just, "Oh, hello, what a beautiful day." I mean, taking time to recognize that actually we are living in a beautiful country, and yes, we have beautiful days, is very important. And there's a lot of resilience here in this country. People have been going through difficult times in history and even recently. And there's a sort of optimism. This is life, and we want to be part of it, and we accept the difficulties and the challenges, and we try to unite in these challenges. There's a lot of dynamism as well in this country. When you look at the economy, it's incredible how fast the economy recuperated after the big crisis of 2008, 2010. Now let's hope that in COVID times that the country will be as fast in recuperating as before, but I have no doubt it will, because the willingness is there and the resources are there.
You spoke about a resiliency in the Irish people to be able to bounce back from adversity. When you and I first met in 1995, it was the 50th anniversary of D-Day, and your ambassador was speaking at that lovely residence on K Street. About the Belgian people, how the Belgiques had that resilience to bounce back after World War II and become a dynamic force in European politics, culture, the arts, and tourism. What do you think Ireland and Belgium can do together, not only in terms of tourism, but in terms of rebuilding our economies, that economic trade that we share that's so important to both of us?
Right. Well, you're talking about resilience, Micheal, and history, and it is true indeed that there are many common characteristics between Ireland and Belgium to that respect. Belgium has been the battlefield of Europe for centuries. It's been occupied for centuries. I mean, I don't have to tell you and your audience that Ireland was occupied as well, and has a long history of, having to cope with a big neighbor. Well, it's the same in Belgium. We have big neighbors, and we have to cope with them and to find ways to deal with them as good neighbors. Well, it's a common challenge, and that's what Ireland and Belgium are doing together within the European Union precisely. And especially in Brexit times, such as now, we both are very sad that the UK is leaving the EU. We both suffer from the trade impact of this. I mean, Ireland is the most severely hit, of course, but then comes Belgium immediately, because we're also very much exposed to trade. But it's not only the trade impact, it's the politics of all of it and the relationship we have built over the years with the UK, and we don't want to get rid of it. So we need to find an agreement, and that's why Belgium and Ireland working together are trying to be very instrumental in this with our EU partners. But this comes because we really, we are in a position to see all the benefits of international cooperation, being good neighbors, working together, and we want to share this expertise we built over the years, first with each other, what we do, and then also with our EU partners.
You talked about relationships, and certainly post-Brexit, that's going to be critical to all countries in the European Union, if more than ever because of COVID-19, the pandemic, and how it's racked economies throughout the world. As trade partners, not only with Ireland, but our big neighbors, do you see a via media by which Britain can continue to trade successfully with countries like Belgium, Ireland, and throughout the EU, despite some of the hard stances taken during the Brexit negotiations?
Well, I think, you just mentioned it, where the EU and the UK are currently in a negotiation. And everybody knows that a negotiation period is a difficult one. Of course, all parties look at their interests first, with goodwill and with the aim of reaching a common agreement where everybody is satisfied. What happens after the negotiation, that is a page we have to write together, but I'm convinced that there is a willingness on both sides, EU and the UK, to go on with the good trade relationship we have. Micheal, this is an interconnected world. I mean, we're not alone on this planet, and we have to find ways to deal with our closest neighbors and partners. So we will. There's no way we will not succeed in that. Now, how exactly? Well, the negotiations are still going on, so I can't tell you what the end result will be. But I'm convinced that there is an absolute willingness to be on good terms, on good trading terms, on good political terms, on good diplomatic terms in the future on both sides.
I want to return to the relationship between Ireland and Belgium, which has always been a very warm one. Yeah. How would you characterize the extent of Belgium's investment in Ireland?
Well, actually, and that's why I said in the beginning that we're so close that we often do not realize how close we are and how important the links between Belgium and Ireland are. Investments in Belgium date back to, the 60s or 70s. Janssen Pharmaceutica, for instance, part of the Johnson & Johnson group, has been in Ireland since the early 80s, I think, and they currently employ 1,000 people in this country, mainly in Cork. and they develop various drugs there. Another well-known Belgian investment here is KBC Bank. They've been here for decades, and they're now among the biggest retail banks in this country. More recently, you had independent news and media was taken over by a Belgian group, Media Huis. They're operating a lot of media, newspapers and online media in Belgium and the Netherlands, and Ireland is their third new market. While independent news and media is the biggest media group in this country, so it's not nothing. Then you have in other sectors, like we have Carta Mundi in Waterford. That's the biggest board game factory in Europe, and they make like Monopoly games in 41 languages and distribute them all over Europe. They employ up to 500 people in Waterford. They were able to operate, by the way, immediately, to resume their operation immediately after lockdown. And actually, you know, it's amazing because lockdown resulted as a boom in the board games industry because people were at home and they needed to keep busy and spend more time with the family. But then you also have Belgian investment in high technology and in renewable energy. Like we have a Belgian company, Park Wind, who will be one of the first to build an offshore wind park off Dundalk. So that's very, very important. So you see Belgian investment here has been here for a while in some of the traditional activities like pharmaceuticals, but is also there for the future with the new sectors like blue energy.
That's outstanding. I have to tell you, my family is a beneficiary of that Belgium investment in Ireland. We've played many board games over the shutdown, and we have you to thank for it now. Tell me, how has Belgium been affected by Brexit in particular, and how close can Belgium and Ireland work together to mitigate the impact of Brexit and COVID-19's impact on our economies?
Right. Well, Belgium has been very much hit by Brexit. As I mentioned, Ireland is got the worst trade impact from Brexit, but Belgium comes second. Or many of our industries are very much exposed to the UK market. The textile industry, agri-food industry, chemicals, many others. And so in order to mitigate that, the first choice was let's work with our EU colleagues. And of course, first with Ireland. One way to mitigate the impact of Brexit is to have our ports work together. So what we've done in the past 3 years is add new direct short sea shipping routes between Ireland and Belgium. The first was Dublin to Zeebrugge. And I remember I was there when then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar baptized the first ship. He said it was a Brexit buster, which is right because it's the biggest short sea cargo in the world, and it's used in this route between Dublin and Zeebrugge. So that's very, very important. In the meantime, there's another route that's been opened between Cork and Zeebrugge, and Belgian ports and Irish ports are talking together to open even more new routes in the coming months. So that's very important. And why is that important? Because Ireland and Belgium are both very important pharma and biotechnology hubs, and we trade a lot with each other. Belgium is the second export market for Ireland. So before 3 years ago, Britain was still the second export market. Now it's Belgium, and by a few points. So we have a great deal of interest in working together, and we do not only in our direct trade relationship, but also within the EU. You will remember that the European Council, that's the heads of state and government, discussed a recovery plan for COVID and the future of the EU budget in July. Well, part of the deal reached in July is related to Brexit. There's an important facility, a budget of 5 billion euro that's made available for member states severely hit by Brexit. And that's due to a joint common effort by the Irish Taoiseach and the Belgian Prime Minister in Brussels at this meeting to get this facility.
And now a brief word from one of our patrons.
I've been working in Louis Copeland's for over 20 years now, and anybody who knows me knows I'm very particular about the way I dress. I think a made-to-measure suit gives somebody a real signature style. You get to truly express who you are. Fit is everything. The beauty with a made-to-measure suit is there's no compromise. You get exactly the fit and the look that you want. I think a man needs to think of a suit in pieces rather than as a single suit, so they can wear the blazer with a pair of jeans, or wearing the trousers separately with a nice piece of knitwear. This way you get the maximum use out of the suit. What makes Louis Copeland really stand out when it comes to made-to-measure is our 80 years of experience and great tailors. We put a huge amount of effort into training up our tailors. They go to one-to-one training sessions, they have to actually sit a test, and this allows them to deliver the perfect suit. The key components of any great suit are a combination of fabric, cut and craftsmanship. When you get these three things right, that's when you get a really brilliant looking suit. When it comes to fabrics, we've got a great selection from the top Italian mills. The lining is a great opportunity to express yourself, to put something a little bit colourful or different on the inside. You can do this through colour or through pattern. The process takes roughly 6 weeks. Once we have your suit made, you come in for a final fitting. This is just to make sure that everything is perfect. Louis Copeland's been in business since 1933. Service is in our history. Made to measure is in our DNA.
We both come from small nations.
Yeah.
And yet we seem to, as they say, box above our weight. How does Belgium and Ireland work together with other small countries in the European Union and with the larger ones to be more effective?
Well, that's an interesting point you raise, Miceal, because indeed there are similarities. Now, we come from a different background within the EU. Ireland joined in the early 70s. Belgium was a founding member, okay? And Belgium comes from the background of the Benelux cooperation, which goes back to the early 20th century. So we sort of we have a lot of experience in being in a group of several states. Whereas Ireland, when it joined the EU, well, it didn't have many contacts with other smaller countries, because its position was very clear. It was a new member. It came in the Union together with Britain, actually, and they were the new members who had to adapt at the time and find their own place in the Union. And then what happens? 2016, Brexit, the UK leaves the Union, or will leave the Union. What happens then? Well, a shock, of course, for everyone, but especially for Ireland, because of the stability on the island of Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement, etc. Okay, but then what's the next question? How do we position ourselves? And then very interesting, because I remember at the time we organized a meeting about Benelux cooperation with DFA, with the Irish Department for Foreign Affairs, because they wanted to know more about how smaller countries were working together within the EU to reach better cooperation, better results, and actually a better prosperity for their populations. So it was interesting because we had these exchanges, and we've seen how Ireland is very, very active on the European scene in discussing with all other member states, and in particular with the smaller ones, to forge alliances and see where there are common interests, where the positions are similar, if you want. And what's interesting is Ireland and Belgium, we don't have like fixed cooperation schemes. We won't exclude anyone. We won't say, oh, I'll never, as Belgium, work with this country within the EU. We so far apart from each other. No, there's no exclusive. We just want to build consensus with like-minded countries. And we are permanently, Ireland and Belgium, trying to find a basis for this consensus, because both countries, we believe in dialogue, exchange, cooperation. Well, we're not big enough to impose decisions to others, okay? But then the clever thing, I believe, is to try to forge consensus from the ground, from the basis, with a critical mass of other smaller and bigger countries.
I want to pick up on that. You talked about cooperation. And I want to come back to this issue again, because COVID-19 has interrupted the personal relationships upon which diplomacy thrives. But I want to ask you about this in particular when it comes to cooperation. Belgium has held a seat on the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member for the last 2 years. Ireland will be taking up a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council in the new year. The UN Security Council has become somewhat dysfunctional. It seems difficult to get anything out of it. In the midst of some of the greatest crises in humanitarian and armed conflicts in the past 50 years. Does Belgium and Ireland work together at the UN? And again, how do small countries have powerful voices, as I know Belgium has had on the UN Security Council, despite its difficulties?
Right. Well, thanks for this question, because it's really, I mean, the UN system is at the heart of Ireland and Belgium's values, international values. We are both committed, both countries are committed to human rights, to the rule of law, respect for the international justice and international law, multilateralism, as we say, which is actually working together in an organization instead of discussing separately on all the international issues. Now, both countries, Ireland and Belgium, have a long experience with the UN. I really commend the work Ireland does in peacekeeping operation. For longer than 60 years, there's always been Irish troops in at least one UN peacekeeping operation. That's just fantastic. We have also, Belgium, a wonderful record in peacekeeping operations, but not as good as Ireland, I'm afraid. But really fantastic. And also, both countries have been on the Security Council as non-permanent members before. And every time Ireland and Belgium have been there, they have expressed their strong voice for dialogue and cooperation. And they can do that because they're not big states, which means that they really can act for the benefit of the international community. I mean, the UN Security Council is not the place where, as Belgium, you will fight for your own national interests. No, you will try to help the international agenda go forward. And you have the means to do it because when you're in the Security Council, you can chair working groups, you chair the Security Council itself once or twice over the 2 years, but you can influence the agenda, and you can, especially behind the scene, make sure that everybody speaks to each other, that everybody understands what the other is saying, and that there is a willingness to listen and to carefully take on board what the other party is telling you, and try to make concrete steps towards a better understanding. We, as smaller states, and I think this is the case for Ireland as well, we are forced to listen to others carefully and to understand, and to make our points as well, but in a context we really master as much as we can. And that's something we can bring to the Security Council. Now, very concretely, we're very happy that Ireland will succeed Belgium in the Security Council from January next. That's wonderful. And we've been working together in the past few months to help Ireland prepare. We have shared our own experience because, as you say, the Security Council now is not what it was 10 years ago when Ireland was on the council. We had the same experience when we started a year and a half ago. It was a different environment than before. And so how do you cope with that? Well, we shared all our experience with our Irish friends, and we wish them all the best. And then beyond the Security Council, in the UN system, I mean, almost every day you see Irish and Belgian diplomats working together because it's very easy, Miceal. We share the same values. We have the same global agenda. I mean, there are nuances if you want, of course, there always are, but globally, we are open economies. We are advocating for free trade, for human rights, for multilateralism, and we also, both countries, that's interesting, we have a special interest in Africa, not a trade interest, I mean a special human interest, and our international cooperation is pretty much directed towards Africa, and we believe that Africa must have a voice within the UN as well.
So let me ask you about that. There's been a lot of criticism of the construct of the UN. Of course, it grew up out of the birth of the Second World War. The permanent members of the UN Security Council can use their veto to stop almost anything, and of late they've exercised it almost continuously. Is there room for the UN to reconsider its configuration so that emerging continents and countries, such as in Africa or India, will find parity where the colonial or the powers of the past may have a declining role on the world stage?
Right. It's a good question, Miceal, and it's right that the way the UN Security Council works now, there is certainly an underrepresentation of some parts of the world, and Africa is certainly one of them. And so the UN has been working for a very long time on reform. Belgium and Ireland strongly believe in the need for reform, And as far as Belgium is concerned, we've been supporting these efforts for years, and we will continue in the coming years. The current setting with the 5 permanent members and the tensions that exist, I mean, it's true there are tensions at that level, make it difficult to really change the situation right now. But believe me, we're working on it. And I think smaller nations can make a difference because we also are, when we are in the Security Council, we are not only the voice of Belgium or the voice of Ireland, we are the voice of all the countries that supported us to become members of the Council. And we know that they also advocate for reform. So we'll bring that to the Council and the UN system.
Let me ask you in closing, these have been difficult times for diplomats being shuttered in, where diplomacy often happens face-to-face, one-on-one, or in small groups, often informal. We often hail the signing ceremonies, but they're often the product of years of personal diplomacy. How has COVID-19 affected personal diplomacy for you and your colleagues? And where do you see the future of diplomacy, given the security of online meetings, video conferencing? Can diplomacy be effective in these times?
Yeah, well, you're right to mention that, and it's a new world for us. On the positive point, the online tools that we've become familiar with over the past 7 months have really helped us to keep our network together and even develop it. To my surprise, actually, I was contacted in the past 7 months by many people online whom I hadn't met before. But on the negative side, it's not the same as meeting in person. I mean, I'm so happy to have this conversation with you online. I had offered, of course, to have you at my residence here on Aylesbury Road around a cup of coffee or tea, and that would have been much nicer. But still, we can have this conversation. Yeah.
I want to ask you about that. Your embassy is situated in a historic building, if I understand correctly. Tell me about your residence on Aylesbury Road and its business and social uses.
Yeah, well, that's actually linked to the previous question, the social activity. But let me talk about the building first. Yeah, it's a period house, a heritage building built in 1881 as part of Lord Pembroke's estate at the time. And then it was bought by a Scottish vet and entrepreneur, John Dunlop. He was the inventor of the pneumatic tire. And he settled after practicing in Belfast for a few years. He settled in Dublin, lived in this house, bought the house that's attached to it for his son. And the family, the Dunlop family, lived here until the 40s, the 1940s. And then the Belgian state bought the house in 1950. And that's where our residence has been since then. Now, the building has been fully refurbished in 2018. My wife and I were lucky enough to have the budget and the leverage to do it. And we worked with fantastic Irish workers and companies here. But why do we have such a beautiful building here and big? Well, actually, because the essence of a residence of an embassy is to bring people together. That's what we've been doing. I mean, in the first 2 years, we've had more than 6,000 people here. and we can organize lunches, cocktail parties, conferences, dinners. In the summer, we usually have a big garden party for National Day with 600 people. We had, oh, that was fun. We had beer and fries parties during the Football World Cup in 2018, also in the garden. We regularly have our neighbors coming over for drinks. We do activities reaching out to the community. For instance, last year, we couldn't do it this year, but we took part in Open House Dublin. So we had hundreds of visitors, mostly from the area, actually. It was nice visiting the residents and the gardens. And actually, yeah, my wife and I, we miss that part of social contacts in the current period. We do, but still there are other ways to try to keep the link. What did we do during lockdown? Well, we supported local organizations reaching out to isolated people. So we, for instance, we made a huge donation to the Simon communities for PPE, personal protection equipment for their teams, and for home starter kits for people they take out of homelessness. So that was a big part of what we could do. We also worked with Friends of the Elderly in delivering meals to elderly people isolated in their homes in Dublin. So that was a way of, on a one-to-one basis, actually, to meet a few people and try to show solidarity. So if you cannot invite people at home and have these contacts, you can also find ways to show solidarity and to try to develop the contacts. It's another way, but it's kind of rewarding because it's very human. So we get a lot out of these contacts.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, let me thank you and Joelle as well for all that you do for the community and the whole embassy and your consular staff for your engagement here in Ireland. Hopefully when COVID-19 is over, we'll see you here in Cork. I will certainly see you next time I'm in Dublin. And remember that the Port of Cork is a great opportunity for development. We look forward to bigger things with Belgium in the future. And I want to thank you again for today's interview.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm happy that you mentioned Cork. And part of my heart is in Cork. I was there several times and really we're working a lot with the Port of Cork. So I really hope for the best for you and for your audience. Well, who knows? We can see each other in Cork sooner than in Dublin. We'll see. But thank you very much for your time.
Your Excellency, thank you. And on behalf of Diplomat Ireland and Diplomat Northern Ireland, thank you very much. Stay safe and all the best.
Thank you very much. All the best, Michael. Bye-bye.